Muslim minister, and this is the Freiburg Assembly, Saturday, the 1st of August in the year 2070. No, sorry, 270. Or following the calendar that the rest of the world uses, 2026. It is 270 years since the final judgment occurred, which if anybody looks at old books, you can find dual dating in the old books. It's always kind of fun. So today I'm going to be talking about remains and the beasts within. And of course I'm doing this from a distinctly Christian Swedenborgian context. So it is not a context that other groups would probably ever read this story in. I wanted to start out by just reading the area I'm probably going to be focusing on the most. This is a huge story, even though it is relatively short. So I'm going to be focusing on primarily chapter 6 of Genesis. These are the descendants of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. Make yourself an ark of, the original word is gopher wood, but no one knows what it means. So they translate it oftentimes as cypress because they think that makes sense to build a boat with. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its width, 50 cubits. Its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to cut a cubit above and put a door of the ark in its side, making it with lower, second, and third decks. For my part, I am going to bring a flood of water on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you, and every living thing of all flesh. You shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be made male and female, of birds according to their kind, of animals according to their kinds, and every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every kind shall come into you to keep them alive. So also take with you every kind of food that is eaten, and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. And then it rained. Here ends the reading of the word. Thanks be to God. So, I wanted to first talk about the word tebah. It is the word we translated ark. It appears twice in the Bible. It is what is used for both Noah's ark as well as for the basket that Moses has put in. It is not used for the Ark of the Covenant, which is interesting, given the connection between what's happening in the Moses basket story and what's happening here. However, you can see the various letters. When Swedenborg talks about every jot and tittle having meaning, he's going into a rich history that every letter of the word ark as it exists there actually has significance. Crossed sticks, a house, and then a man's arm, which all of these things, you can see what it says there, really come into this meaning for an ark which is about saving the breath of life itself, which the Ark of the Covenant is not about saving the breath of life itself, but both Moses and the Ark of Noah are about saving the breath of life itself. So it's just a fun little thing there. Now we have an actual supposed construction of what the ark looks like. Most everybody is familiar with the cute little boat. But this is the best that, what I will say, the great minds of the literal world have come into thinking the ark looked like. It had one door on its side. It was not a place that had access to the out of doors, except for a window at the very top, which, if you believe the biblical narrative, was only opened after 40 days. It's living in a dark, stinky boat for 40 days. And living through it, yeah. It's pretty phenomenal when you think about what it is. So what we are talking about, the ark itself corresponds to, in Swedenborgian terms, remains. It is the story of remains, or remnants. The word is typically known as relique if you do it in Latin. This is a statement from Isaiah, though, and I want to talk about it in terms of what comes next and why we need the remnant. For a short moment I abandoned you, but with great compassion I will gather you back. In a flood of anger I hid my face from you for a moment, but with eternal mercy will I have mercy on you. Your Redeemer Jehovah has said, for me it is like the waters of Noah, to whom I swore that the waters of Noah would no longer pass over the earth. So have I sworn that I would not rage against you or censure you, afflicted one and storm-tossed, and could not find comfort. So we get this picture of the ark, right? It's a pretty fearful picture, I think. So the purpose behind the ark, to help us relate to it, because right now it's a story that actually, if one believes geological record of a flood that never existed, which questions the degree to which a construction like this actually existed. But it connects to us because the flood is about temptation. It's about a time when you are having a significant shift in your personhood. We have times where we are making little tiny changes. And then we have times where we make big changes. This is a redefining moment in our lives. This is a time where everything we understood gets wiped out and destroyed. And I don't know if you've ever had moments like this, but it's not comfortable. We feel alone. We feel isolated. We oftentimes might even feel like God isn't with us or present. Because everything in our lives, no matter how hard we try, seems to not be working. Maybe you've had experiences like this. Maybe you haven't. I certainly have. And so this is part of this idea of spiritual growth. But then the question is, to some degree, how did we get here? So I really wanted to talk about this because I hear this constant love for the most ancient church. We all want to talk about living a life where we speak purely from love and we get rid of all this truthy stuff. We tried that once. It didn't work for us. What happened when the most ancient church, the earliest church, it was celestial, it was heavenly, it's everything we talk about, What happened when they communicated directly through love was step by step, they decided that what they desired or wanted was more important than what God wanted. And they didn't have a stable truth that they could anchor themselves to, right? So that's one of the things. There wasn't a stable truth. And it just eroded. And this is the most ancient church. Then it comes through this time of decline, corrupting the love, corrupting the wisdom, desire, it should be exploiting the mysteries of faith, using sensory evidence and factual knowledge to try and control the outcome. And Swedenborg says it's corrupted by dreadful persuasions and filthy desires. And here's my question for you. This is one of those times I actually ask you a question during my lectures. What is a dreadful persuasion and a filthy desire to you? Sex and drugs, maybe rock and roll, right? Maybe you even go as far as saying it's money. For Swedenborg, he goes more qualitative than that. Swedenborg says, I am the center of everything. That is a dreadful persuasion. Power proving worth is a dreadful persuasion. Only what I can see and measure is real. The ends justify the mean. I don't need God or anyone else. I am in control of my own destiny, and my group alone possesses truth. These are persuasions that he believes leads us into trouble. I love the opera glasses. They can get really tiny. There's not much I can do about that. The filthy desires. Loving admiration more than usefulness. Wanting to be praised. I've heard lots of people this week, and it wasn't just here. It's weird. It's like the stars aligned for this. Talking about the fear of missing out. And certainly people in this room mentioned this, but this also was something that was mentioned. And this falls into filthy desires because it's this fear that is coming from those persuasions about my life won't be good if I am not there. Enjoying another person's humiliation, seeking revenge because it feels satisfying, loving wealth solely because it gives me superiority over others, delighting in deceit if it brings me an advantage, using religion to gain influence or praise rather than to love God. Oh, did I? Oh. Rejoicing when rivals fail. These are the majority of the persuasions and filthy desires that Swedenborg is talking about. It's for Swedenborg, for those who know, Swedenborg says it's okay to enjoy nice things as long as they're in the proper order. It's okay to engage in sensory things so long as they're in the proper order. What these are situations where things are out of the proper order. Now, I really, since the teens might be here, I thought I should make it relevant to teenagers. So it covers social media. I don't know. External focuses on social media. My value depends on how many likes I get. It creates a focus on comparison and vanity. It makes us feel like less all the time. Career ambition for those who are rising through college and entering that. Success excuses the neglect of others, and it makes it so work becomes an idol. Consumerism, if I can just have more, I will be happy. I will be satisfied. And it creates actual endless dissatisfaction, because the second you possess it, it doesn't actually fill the hole. And you need the next bigger and better thing. Political identity, those who disagree with me are less than human. Anyone hear this recently? Name the party, I've heard it both sides. Hatred replaces charity. It's strong language. And yet, I've seen it confirmed on both sides. Entertainment. I deserve constant stimulation. It stops us from having time to reflect or pray or sit with our thoughts and have those moments where we pause our mind to have insights that the Lord might give us. And then for those of you in the religious world, looking righteous is enough, leading to spiritual hypocrisy, which, by the way, is why Swedenborg says the vast majority of clergy in his day go to hell. Just saying. If you're wondering where you're going and you're ordained, just possibly, a little bit of spiritual hypocrisy can happen. All right, so remains are symbolized, when we go back to this, remains are actually, I'm going to stop for a second, because this is a really wonderful thing. People say all the time, remains are memories. Like one of the big things, 10, the number 10 corresponds to remains because of teaching kids the 10 Commandments. And that's true. We memorize the 10 Commandments, and that is a form of implanting remains. But when Swedenborg talks about remains, he's also talking about the spiritual state that we feel when we're given them. And so all I can say is, when we get what we'll say, a loving or friendly hug, the feeling of a hug is hard to put into words, right? The feeling of feeling unsafe and having a loving person's arm surround you that just gives you that sense of calm. That moment when you first have maybe a feeling of understanding what the divine is. These remains are things that are they're things that can't be put into words. At points, I'll be clear, I watch Hallmark movies from time to time. And pretty much any movie, when it gets to or play, when it starts getting to crucifixion allegory, I just start to cry. I can't stop myself. Les Mis, just constantly, whenever this notion of what does it mean to give your life for another's happens, it just hits me. And it hits me because of the remains that were put inside of me about the Lord on the cross. And the idea of giving, of charity, of loving someone so much that you would lay your life down for them, that's what's being protected by the ark, right? It's not just a storehouse of books. It's the state, it's the feeling. It's so much more than words can express. So this is where I love to get into, biblical translation, as well as into one of the hardest things that our human's mind can ever understand. One, translating things into modern language has difficulty. As you can see, if we were to say the ark is 515 feet long, it would be a true statement-ish. But you'd miss the 300 cubits. For Swedenborg, the numbers 300 has incredible meaning. The 515 might also, I don't know. I didn't look it up. I'm sure the number 515, I could come up with something. But it isn't what the ark is about. Right? So for Swedenborg, and this is very tiny down here, the length, just like in heaven, is about a spiritual state. The width, just like in heaven, is about our spiritual state. The height, just like in heaven, is about a spiritual state. So we get all of these numbers and we can start building this replica, but this replica isn't what Swedenborg's talking about. Any time that we imagine something that can be measured, we're stepping into this world, not the spiritual world. So if we close our eyes and think about this, what 300 cubits means is complete preservation, 50, freedom and charity, and the height, the elevation through remains, or what we'll say a complete spiritual journey. What this is about the Lord protecting us for our spiritual journey. The numbers don't mean anything. Everything in this is about being hugged in the time of danger. Noah's Ark is a big hug. Isn't that nice? And it's a hug that holds you. And that's what I'm saying. Feel the ark. Don't just try and imagine it. The ark is a statement of God saying, I love you and I want you to be safe. See if there's anything else of note that... There's also fun things, by the way, if you get into, if you divide it by 30, its length is actually 10 and its height is 1. And there's an illusion there that the fullness of our spirituality is based in the preservation of our remains. It's kind of a cool little ratio thing there, but So the emphasis, while we see geometry, is on spiritual order, not on the physical things. So, see, a remnant is not just the good and true things we learn out of the Lord's Word from the time we are small that become stamped in our memory. It is also the states that rise out of those things, such as a state of innocence from babyhood, a state of love from our parents, siblings, teachers, and friends, a state of charity toward our neighbor, and in compassion toward the poverty-stricken and the needy. In short, it is all states of goodness and truth. Is that heavy for anybody? I mean, here we are at Freiburg Camp. What does that relate to us? What is our obligation to our youngest camper? But the implantation of remains. What is our obligation throughout growth is to help people get in touch with and I don't mean that we should cause problems in people's lives, but help people understand what their remains are, the tools that they have to draw upon. It's very powerful. And as a camp, it should be something we focus on to a great degree, I would assume. So we get to the actual ark itself, and this is where it gets all correspondential, and we learn some correspondences, but basically there are 3 levels to the ark, and they're all about our intellectual processes and how we deal with problems. On the very bottom, you have factual knowledge, then you have relational concepts, and you have intellectual concepts. The rooms are where we compartmentalize will and understanding. And then the bitumen on the inside and outside is protection from the falsities trying to break their way in. And the window, our ability to understand what the Lord calls us to be. One of the things I really like is the concept of the door on the side of the ark. We never hear about the animals once they're inside the ark, right? I mean, they get in there and we don't hear about the inner animal politics. We assume a lot about the inter-animal politics, but we never hear about them in Scripture. And so what you get is this concept of the door on the side of the ark actually being about hearing or learning. And the idea of all of the things that are coming in are the things that we are willing to hear. And how much greater we are as people when we're willing to engage lifelong learning, adult learning, being willing to listen, being willing to hear, how much more that does for us to give us a strong foundation for battling difficulty. Sorry about that, people online. Every person, right, so this is the thing, is we ask who we relate to in the Bible. And before I said we relate to the earth itself is, at this point, it's still there, right, because the flood hasn't come. But what's happening is that the boat is on the ark, and we are listening to the good things in the world, and we are storing them. And each person is not which animal do you identify with, which person do you identify with, but it's the entirety of what's in the story. So every person has innumerable genera and more innumerable species of things of understanding and will that are most distinct from one another, although we sometimes don't get it. Swedenborg is aware that our mind is massively complex. And he's really opening the door for our unique individual talents, unique individual things, for us to bring in as much as we can possibly understand. And that these are all gathered into the ark and into the memory where then, when we face difficulty, we can call back to those times of, I'm in this horrible situation. How do I find peace? That's my question for you today. How do you find peace? So the remedy revealed. Heaven is formed while living an active life in society. Ravens are false ideas. And I'm going to say what I think the most dangerous false ideas are. What I love will make me happy. Anyone think that sounds weird for a Swedenborgian to say? Because all the time we say, follow our love. In temptation, our loves are usually wrong. Anyone want to challenge that? I'll give you an example. I would not be tempted if what I loved wasn't bad for me. I'll use a simple thing about diet. If I love chocolate and sugar and I'm trying to cut calories, if I didn't love chocolate, guess what would not be giving me cravings? My love for that. I would have no problem. I could just do what I knew was right. My loves are more likely to lead me astray in temptation than to actually give me a good understanding of what it is I need to actually do. I know I'm in temptation because I know what's right, but I don't love what's right. So you get these false ideas that get sent out, and as long as we have those false ideas of what give us love and what give us meaning, then we start running into a problem of it circling and never coming down. We get lost in our own thoughts. But then we have a true idea of the divine. And it brings back one day. Oh, and it goes out once and brings back nothing. So sometimes it's hard. We got to keep reaching out. But then it brings back an olive, which is a feeling of good from loving someone other than you. And a branch, the truth of that value. So, a simple thing to maybe deal with difficult times. Find a way to perform use or services. Now, I don't mean the uses where we define my use is doing something that's just good for me, because Swedenborgians do it all the time. I'm talking about finding a way you can actively help another person and have no benefit from it outside of caring about them, seeking to understand the neighbor. And again, this can be done at work by saying, I don't care what my quotas are. I'm really going to listen to the life of another person's story and try and help them the best I can. This can be done by going out and working in a soup kitchen. It can be done by going to church and listening to the people around you who are in need. Seek truth during this time because it leads to wiser living. In other words, open your ears and listen to those animals you've stored inside. Enjoy worldly goods without making them ultimate, meaning, how do I use what I have to help others or to help God? Acknowledge that every genuine good comes from the Lord. That's pretty simple. Regularly examine one's motives, practice repentance when selfish loves become apparent. And this is actually doing the reverse order of what caused the decline of the most ancient church. But you're doing it with this existence of truth. And then ultimately, we land on the ground, and one of Swedenborg's most beautiful insights is that the ark, Noah does not build the materials of the ark. He builds with the materials that God directs. And this goes back to even Noah at this time. He's doing it himself. He's building the ark. He is a participant, but he is doing it with an understanding of where God is leading. And so the nature of our own action and God's direction are in harmony, which is why he's saved ultimately. And at that, I am at 5 minutes past a half an hour. Are there any thoughts, questions, or reflections? Oh, okay.
I have one. I was thinking, we're talking about good remains, and what can we do with the people that don't have any good remains? And they are so hard to help and reform, and they are a problem in our society. But it's terrible that they don't have good remains. It seems like there are people that don't have good remains.
Oh, so I'm
or have very few good remains because they were abused as children.
Yeah, I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond with a heart of what Katie responded with, like, oh my gosh. But I also hear what you're saying. If we believe what Swedenborg says the Bible is indicating, all people will have remains. That doesn't mean that that person still isn't sitting there circling with a raven above. And the question is, not do they have them, but how do we unlock them? But then I'm also going to say we have mental illness. And sometimes there could be, and Swedenborg's very clear, regeneration is for people who are within a spectrum that's capable, and there might be some people who are not capable for one reason or another, and God will love them in the afterlife. But my next response to it is, I have a hard enough time fighting this fight for myself that trying to fix other people isn't something that I'm capable to do. But if I'm trying to reach them, and if in hostage negotiation, this tactic is used all the time, humanize the hostages. Try and tell stories, not truths. And when we do that, when we make that connection on the emotional level, we're trying to get to the states of innocence that that person might have. And how do you unlock those states? There's been a lot of psychological work in unlocking those, primal states. And it's worked for some, and you're right, there's some that haven't. And I hate to say it, but sometimes that's why jails exist, is that the only thing you can do is remove people from society in certain ways, and it's not necessarily nice.
Just to touch on what Katie was saying, it made me think, which I'll look up later, but is everyone born with good remains from the moment of birth? So no matter what happens to you from your mother and everything else, there are always good remains?
So if one believes what Swedenborg says, now I also want to make clear with my statement, I don't believe our criminal justice system is good. I don't believe that's the case, and I can get into the discussion of criminal justice, but I do believe that there are times at which there are individuals, that just we don't have the ability to understand how to fix them. However, if one believes what Swedenborg says, God implants remains, as well as every person that person comes into contact with. And a lot of our human remains can be hurt, but ultimately there's always going to be a divine remain somewhere in that person. Unlocking that is difficult, but a person, I think you're right, this is why we are called, and early Swedenborgians in the United States spent a lot of time reforming education, a lot of time welcoming immigrants, a lot of time doing things to try and implant remains in the young. Because they understood that you're exactly right. Kids can be taught the wrong thing and not be given the tools. Those who are taught the right things have a better chance. The same thing is actually true with the people who founded Perkins School for the Blind, when they realized, oh my gosh, you have all of these blind and deaf kids who are taught that they're possessed by demons and offer no good to society. And they realized by watching kids play, right, they watched blind and deaf kids play and realized there's no difference in those kids. It's just a matter of communication, and how do we start to communicate? And boom, all of a sudden, blind and deaf kids were moved from being demon-possessed trash to being incredible people who eventually, we can, go through the line of folks who've done wonderful things. I do want to shift on to Katie's question.
Oh, I was going to run to you. Okay.
Naturally, the question grew a little bit with that last thing. I thank you for what you said on that, Kevin. I got to sort out my thoughts. Definitely, we owe incarcerated people all of our compassion, prayer, and visits. If you, that's a very maybe a loving act you could do for the strong who feel like they could. But my wonder, and I also wanted to share that something you said brought out maybe the social media bit, but especially in the second half of your talk, we have a little phrase in my home that when you're on your social media and your phone too much, you're looking for love in all the wrong places. So that's helps me if I feel like, oh, I'm getting tired of the scrolling, looking for love in all the wrong places. There's nothing for me in that. Let me put it down and go find some love somewhere else. But my question really was, did Swedenborg talk about Noah's Ark in terms of vastation, which is still a term I'm trying to understand, as in the breaking down of everything to build it back up? Yes. This is what you have to hold that's left over through that.
It's exactly vegetation. I do it just speaking about prison visits. One of my I'm a big fan of Alexis de Tocqueville as well as Michel Foucault. And both of them really liked the premise, which they pull from Christian scripture, that you can tell the most about a country by studying the least of the country. And so they really came here and studied prison systems and asked the question of what does it mean to be moral when you walk into a prison. And so I've had a long fascination with U.S. prison systems. And at one point I received a letter from a man when I lived in Whitman, Massachusetts, that said, I'm a prisoner and a convicted pedophile, and nobody will visit. Will you please come? And I visited him 3 or 4 times before I left, just because he said nobody will talk to me. And it really, being given that basic human decency of having a visit was something I could give, no matter what the person had done. So it is very powerful, as Katie's saying. And if anyone hasn't ever done prison visits, it's an amazing experience. And letters are great too. But yeah, it is exactly what you see there with the decline of the most ancient church is what Swedenborg would talk about with vastation. It's a redefining or reordering of the priorities. And we go through it multiple times throughout our lives. And what are the tools that we need? And I always try and look for helpful tools, which is why I was kind of excited to study this and pull out, ask this from the question, what are the beasts within that are going to save us in these times. And it's to how do you deal with devastation, which is coming for us all. That time of meaninglessness and empty, what brings it about, and how do we respond to it? And I'm not saying I have the answers. Those are pretty broad categories. But I certainly have found in my life that when I'm beating myself up, I feel better when I give up my desire and live into the desire of my children, or give up certain things that I felt like were really important. And like my day off. Maudie, what did I used to do on my day off all the time? Work. Build houses. Work, yeah. There's something about trying to clear my mind, that clearing my mind was about not focusing on me. And it put the world in different perspective for me a little bit. Big fan of Habitat, if anyone doesn't know. Love the Habitat.
So being new to a lot of these terms and remains has always been a little bit confusing to me, but so remains are always coming from God, the positive remains, or are there negative remains?
No,
Or-
remains are always positive in
Okay.
Swedenborg's thing, but they're not always coming from God.
Right.
They are things that God is helping us store that might come from parents,
Right.
community members. It's also really important for us to realize the importance of getting involved in good organizations that can help us foster remains.
Right.
Too, Swedenborg would argue that the things that are negative are still just as bad, but they're the flood.
Mhm.
They're the constant assault of falsities.
Okay. That makes sense.
And that the remains are about what are being protected in order to break through the falsities.
So I'm thinking about in my job as a school psychologist, I work with a lot of kids who go through a lot of tough things and get a lot of negative messages. And, the question of how do you reach somebody and maybe open up those remains, to me is love. It really is. And I've seen it many times where somebody who has been so hurt has got this huge wall, and you can talk to them all you want about life or whatever, and it's not going to make any difference. But actual, true love, unconditional, positive regard, whatever you want to call it, really being open and real with someone can really open that up, and they will let you love them. So.
One of the things with doing youth work is anyone can attend one youth retreat. Kids will only start to value the things that come from the people who've attended 3 or more. They need the relationship. Don't you think that's true, guys? Come on. One person comes, what happens? Then they leave and you never see them again. It's like, oh yeah, that guy did that. But you have someone who attends every youth retreat. You see him and you're like, hey, I'm going to pick on Ben because he's my favorite one to pick on. Not that Ben, the other Ben. Ben, I twisted his arm to go to Columbus Day retreat. It was like I was pulling him down the hill a little bit. I hope he watches this online so he knows I'm talking about it. But he was like, okay, I'll do it. But like he all of a sudden, he felt a connection there, and he's been, I think, to every retreat since then, out of a genuine desire to be there and care, and you feel it, and you sit there, and that student comes into your room, and you say, you're good for who you are. The first time they come in, they're probably not going to listen, but when you start showing them that you mean it, they hear it, and it unlocks that deep remain. It's an amazing, powerful thing. And the funny thing is, it is both you unlocking your remains and helping unlocking others' remains. It's a double gift because you're touching that hug too. When you realize that you've managed to do it, it's a beautiful thing, and it's just a whole love fest. I don't know what else to call it. Lynn had her hand up, and while she's getting the thing, but I do want to say what the difference between on the trip back is that you do have that kind of understanding of an external truth, and that external truth, unlocking the love, gives us grounding, at least in this world, which is what the kind of growth pattern is from the most ancient church to the new church.
Yeah, I think when we start thinking about children versus adults, I think we have two different relational areas. I worked in a lockdown psych for adults, and it was one of the worst in the country. And at the same time, the people on the floor that treated them horribly didn't make any headway. And the people that treated them well and could hear them, there was movement. That's not to say that they ever got out of the lockdown psych ward. But I think those are the parts where you're talking that mental health aspect. I worked on the streets of Oakland with a lot of the gang members. Mm-hmm. And they are just loving what they're doing. They don't really care that they want to rise up to a higher consciousness. They just stay in this realm. And it's very interesting watching that. And I know we can move it. I know you're going to talk, but I've worked diligently with the Catholic workers.
Yeah.
And, really worked with the police chief. He used to be a Black Panther of Oakland, and he was fantastic. But, he did apartheid. He worked with a guy in apartheid over in Ireland as well. So the two of them took on us, two of us as students, and it was just so phenomenal to be able to go in and look at areas. Where do we bring ourselves in these areas? Mm-hmm. And there's certain areas where it's outside our bound. We have to hand it to God.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we can only work on ourselves, and this is really important. This is not how do you fix others. This is how do you work on yourself. But there is also a part of when you share this. I'm going to use some fundamentals language. When you witness your story, you can reach people. And I can certainly say Boston right now is currently the city that has, of the major cities in the U.S., has the least amount of violence. It also has one of the strongest efforts to, I would say, just trying to find the human dignity of the other. And the way they brought about ends of violence in Boston, it was about getting to know people and to again find the human core. And whether or not in an incarcerated lockdown, which I had a lot of lockdown experiences in my chaplaincy, the greatest gift you can give another human is just the gift of dignity and love. Whether or not they need to be locked up or not, it's a universal gift that we can all give. And when we do that, that is the definition of what charity is. It's wanting to learn and know about the other. And then loving them for it and wanting to help them be more who they are. And that's what the Lord did. In his ministry on earth, is he taught, he listened to us, let us see the divine so we could relate, and then gave us an example to live by. And it's primal sharing of the inherent dignity of humanity. And we are at time as, it's either that or Trevor saying, look, my name's Trevor, or that we're at time. Now he's spelling out his name. All righty. Well, thank you all for listening. Happy camp, and I will see you all next year. Maybe.